Welcome to the Mind Solution Podcast with Sarah Maud. The Mind Solution Podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution Podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Hi there and welcome to another episode of the Mind Solution Podcast. My name is Sarah Maud, and in this podcast I'm going to be sharing with you some insights about the difference between self-awareness and consciousness. Now, the difference between self-awareness and consciousness is actually something that I wrote about for a blog post on the mindsolution.com website. And much to my surprise and delight, it's actually the highest rating blog post on the site. And for me, I just love seeing that because what I absolutely know to be true is the difference that it can make to people's lives, to their way that they show up, to their health, to their happiness, when they raise their levels of self-awareness and therefore raise their levels of consciousness. And for me, my journey into my own level of self-awareness started many years ago. And if you were to see my office, you would find a bookcase that's lined with journals that span well over a decade of my life. And for me, journaling's become a ritual that's played such a significant part in raising my levels of self-awareness. And over the years, I've taken the time to sit down and flick back over some of my earlier journals. And I'm going to be really honest with you here. Some of them have me cringing. Some of them have me shaking my head at that younger version of myself because that younger version of me, she used to think that she was pretty self-aware. But let me tell you, the journals tell a very different story. But what I do witness in these journals is a young woman who was on a journey, on a very spiritual journey of self-discovery, which actually stems back to university when I was introduced to the Celestine prophecy by James Redfield. And that journey kicked off something with me at a much deeper level. And that journey continued and it took me into the corporate world and a career in human resources until I found myself studying life coaching. And I never had any intention of doing what it is that I did now, but a series of events led me to studying coaching and going on to become a solution-focused psychotherapist and hypnotherapist, where everything that I was learning about the mind, about self-awareness, about consciousness, I couldn't stay in my HR career any longer. I felt like this calling to take what I was learning out into the world. And fast forward to now, I now run a global employee wellbeing training company, which is doing exactly that. And with a real passion for the mind and a love for all things that are esoterical and energy related, understanding the quantum field and the universe, I've continued on that journey to dig deep into myself, to answer that big question of who am I? And explore what I would probably say is a very tangled web of my thought patterns and my beliefs. And over the years of working with people, One of the absolute joys that I witness is when somebody's able to see something which until that moment had been blind to them. Now, this might be a pattern of thought. It might be the way that they've been viewing a health condition. It might be a limiting belief. It might be seeing the reason that they feel anxious, or just simply how they've been viewing a particular situation. And what I've seen is that when that light goes on, when they're able to see things from a very different perspective, it brings with it just so much clarity and insight and wisdom. But people are often confused about what the difference is between self-awareness and consciousness. So, in this podcast, I'm going to invite you on this journey so that together we can explore the realms of self-awareness and consciousness. So, my first question to you is, how much have you taken the time to understand yourself? Now, I know for myself that when I was still in the corporate world, even though I'd read the book, The Celestine Prophecy, I'd never really taken the time to understand myself, why I think the way that I do, to understand where I was limiting myself, where I was potentially arguing for my limitations. But what I did see a lot of in the corporate world was the use of psychometric tests. And maybe you've used psychometric tests, maybe you've experienced them within your organization. So you might have done DISC or Insights or Myers-Briggs. And for me, while these tools can be helpful starting points for self-discovery, I would put it to you that the journey of self awareness and transformation runs so much deeper. Because I know from my own experience that learning that I was ENFP or a yellow person or highly dominant under pressure didn't fundamentally change how I showed up on a day-to-day basis. Now, I'm not saying that I'm against psychometric tests as a starting point, but what I do see is that alone they're not enough to create true transformation within you. And back in May of this year, I was actually delivering a keynote talk to a group of unicorn company founders at an event that was hosted by UBS. And what I shared with the entrepreneurs is that the unicorn symbolizes the transformation that occurs within us when we tap into our innate wisdom and power. And I just find that so powerful in itself because this is something that is tied to our consciousness. And the journey of self awareness, I feel that it's a very intimate journey. It's a journey of self discovery. It's like a gentle exploration of your thoughts, of your beliefs, of the stories that we've told about ourselves, about our identity, who it is that we think we are, our emotional responses, our behaviors. And I'm not going to lie, the journey can be quite bumpy at times. It can be quite uncomfortable to really look at yourself. But understanding yourself and the way that you show up is also like embarking on an adventure to uncover things within yourself that when you can see them loud and clear, then you can transform them. Because ultimately, we can't change what we can't see within ourselves. So if you feel like there's some aspect of yourself that's not serving you, that's not working for you, that you keep thinking the same thoughts and reacting in the same way and finding yourself in the same situations again and again, which is incredibly frustrating. Well, in order to change that, in order to transform that, we have to be prepared to look at ourselves. And in looking at ourselves, it's not about judging ourselves. It's not about damning ourselves in any way, shape, and form, but it's simply about highlighting what is it that's keeping us where we are. And by delving into that inner landscape, what I know to be true is that you will also gain such invaluable insights into your strengths, into your qualities, into values. But you'll be able to identify those habitual thought patterns that around about 95% of the time are running the show. And because we have one mind that has two dualities to it, we have the conscious mind and then we've got the unconscious mind. And that unconscious mind is very habitual. It's simply like a storehouse of patterns that's just doing its thing in the background. So if we're not fully conscious, if we're not fully present, then the unconscious mind is running the show. And your thoughts, well, they create a perceptual reality. So recognizing those trains of thought, those stories that you've created from thoughts and beliefs is absolutely critical for not only raising your level of awareness, but raising your levels of consciousness. And something I remember reading in Michael Neill's book, The Inside Out Revolution, he emphasizes the importance of understanding the nature of thought and how that shapes our experience. And he wrote that we are living in the feeling of our thinking. We are living in the feeling of our thinking. And what that means in simple terms is that our perceptions and our reactions are created from the inside out, which to me highlights even more the importance of self-awareness if we want to change our reality. Because more often than not, we believe that the way that we feel is coming from somewhere outside of us. It's coming from a conversation or an argument that we've had with somebody. It's coming from our job. I've lost count of the amount of times that people say to me, my job is really stressful at the moment. That the way that we feel is because of how our children are behaving, because of a health condition that we have. But really, everything that you're experiencing is an internally generated perceptual map and model that you carry around inside your neurophysiology, and it's that which is shaping your reality. But the mind, it loves to play hide and seek. And this is what I mean when I say you can't change what you can't see. And this is where, excuse me, in my view, coaching and therapy is just worth its weight in gold, because trying to identify some of those deeper habitual thought patterns, especially when they seem real to us, especially when they seem like they are justified, can be very tricky to change on our own. And I know from my experience, I mean, I work with a coach every month and have invested in the region of well over 500 coaching and therapy sessions. And when I tell that to people, people think, oh gosh, maybe you were really messed up. Maybe you had a lot of trauma that you needed to process. Maybe there was lots of stuff in your childhood that needed to be addressing for you to need that many coaching and therapy sessions. But actually, that wasn't the case. While I had thought patterns that didn't serve me and I absolutely had limiting beliefs, the vast majority of the coaching and therapy sessions that I have haven't been used to deal with pain and suffering, but actually quite the opposite, because I use them to grow and evolve my level of self-awareness and therefore my level of consciousness. I use these sessions to focus on what it is that I want to create, what I want to create within my life, what it is that I want to create within the business, and to then be able to transform any of the thoughts and the feelings and the beliefs and the ideas that are potentially in conflict with that creation. And when I started to study solution focused psychotherapy and hypnotherapy, I was blown away by the power that hypnotherapy had to transform the inner blueprint of the unconscious mind. And as a result, I've gone on to train in even more leading edge therapies such as the MAP method and EFT tapping and energy psychology. And these combined just do so much of the heavy lifting. Whereas if we're trying to change our thought patterns from our current level of thinking, well, we usually end up just going on a merry-go-round that's very difficult to stop and to change and to get off. And as part of my journey, I gained my coaching certificate through Jamie Smart, who is the author of Clarity. And Jamie, like myself, works on this understanding of what's really creating our experience. This outside in misunderstanding, which goes back to what I was saying, that we believe that our feelings, our experiences are coming from somewhere other than our thoughts. And when people start to understand this, when I'm explaining this to either a private client or I'm explaining this in the form of employee wellbeing webinars or leadership training, this understanding of what's really creating our experiences is so empowering. It's so empowering because it invites individuals to raise their levels of self-awareness, to help them to see that they are not victims of circumstance. And when I've seen firsthand the impact of this understanding, this impact of what's really creating our experience and how everything that you experience, no exception, is thought generated, I've witnessed mental health problems such as anxiety and depression just melt away. Old limiting beliefs that just start to fall away. And problems which employees share with us on our employee wellbeing webinars that until that point had been consuming them, again, just fall away because they're able to see something that they hadn't been able to see before. They're able to see that their true source of pain and suffering is thought generated. And the one thing that we absolutely have control over is the way that we think. Now, if you're used to thinking at 200 miles an hour, it might not seem like you have any control over your thinking. But when we start to slow down the mind, when we start to calm everything down, then we can move into what's often referred to as an insight friendly space. And an insight friendly space is where we can experience our inner innate wisdom, that innate wisdom that we all have access to. And it's an innate wisdom that brings with it a new perspective, a fresh new dollop of thinking. It's what allows us to see things from a very different level of consciousness. And there's no upper limit to your consciousness. And given that we live our lives from the level of the unconscious mind around about 95% of the time, then trust me, there is a lot to explore when it comes to raising your levels of consciousness. And I like to think of it as stepping into a glass elevator. So you can only see the level that you're at based on your current level of thinking. But the more inner work that you do, the more that you develop your self-awareness, the higher that you rise in that elevator of consciousness and move on to the next level of understanding, the next level of insight. And universal consciousness is the power that enables us to experience reality. And so the purer that our thoughts are, the higher the state of consciousness that we live in. And consciousness, it has no form. Consciousness is a neutral power that is there before human experience. It's a beautiful gift that we've been blessed with. And it gives us that ability to realize the existence of creation, to be able to relate to one another. And I see consciousness as just this wondrous expansion, and it extends far beyond self-awareness. I think consciousness is an invitation to dance with the universe, to embrace the interconnectedness for all things. And if you could just imagine or think about or just get a sense, even for a moment, of being part of a grand cosmic tapestry where every thread is intricately woven around you. Everything is intricately woven together. And consciousness, it whispers to your soul. And it reminds you of the, I'd say, inherent unity within the world around you. And Sadhguru often speaks about the limitless nature of consciousness. And one of the things that he says is that when your perception is enhanced, you see everything as a part of yourself. And there is no such thing as the other. So the only thing that creates this sense of separation is the ego. And the ego, which we all have, but the ego can only operate from a level of fear. And every time that we feed that fear, we feed that insecurity with our thinking, it creates this greater sense of separation. And the ego, it can be very sneaky, it can be very, very powerful. And I remember many, many years ago being at a conference with the wonderful Dr. Joe Dispenza. And it was a conference in London, and we were in a room with about 700 people. And I'd flown down from Edinburgh to London for this 2-day event. And it was the first time that I'd heard Dr. Joe Dispenza speak in person. And I was really, really geared up. I was really excited about it. But what was fascinating for me to observe through my level of self awareness is that I spent about the first half of the day, on the first day, feeling so angry. And I was listening to him talk and I was thinking, yeah, I know this. I know this. I know this. He's not saying anything different that I haven't read in his books. And if you've ever read any of Dr. Joe Dispenza's books, they're not light reading, they're like a brick. And so I was just thinking, I'm not getting anything new from this. I'm not hearing anything new. And this anger was it was like this boiling pot of emotion inside me, to the point that the friend that I'd gone to this event with was kind of like looking at me thinking, I don't really know what's going on with her. And even at lunchtime, when we went out and we went onto the South Bank in London, it was a nice day. I was still just so aware of this feeling of anger, to the point I literally just wanted to rip somebody's head off. And so when we came back after lunch and sat down, I thought, God, you can't keep in this state. What is this about, Sarah? Sort it out. And so I went to the bathroom and I was just kind of tuning into my body, and I was feeling all this anger, this tension, and just being kind of quite curious about what's going on here. And as I walked back into the conference room, Dr. Joe had started to play lots of images on these huge plasma screens of people on his week-long retreats. And, it was a very beautiful experience. There were people there that were meditating, there were people that were hugging. You had all of this really powerful music around the room, and I was very aware that I didn't want to just go and sit straight back in my seat. So I just took a few moments and I stood at the back of the room. And as I was watching these images on the screen, the words came to me: stop trying to fight it. And I literally just looked at the ceiling and said to myself, okay, I'm ready to surrender. And the moment that I said that, this huge rush of emotion just came from the very pit of my stomach up, and my heart just burst open. And I had tears just rolling down my face. And I absolutely know that those words, stop trying to fight it, that didn't come from my thinking. That didn't come from my intellect. That came from something far, far greater. That came from that innate wisdom. And what I know to be true now, when I think back to this event that was years and years ago now, is that that anger was my ego. It was like my ego had a sniff of what was to come. It knew that it was about to be given its P45, because it knew the moment that I surrendered, that I fell into my heart, that I experienced the energy of my heart, that I experienced the feeling of connection, to all that is, then in that moment it wouldn't exist. So it was like my ego was trying to put its claws into me. It was trying its best to derail me because it knew what was coming. And what was just so transformative about that experience is that for the next day and a half, every meditation that I went into, I just dropped into my heart. And the tears, they just continued to flow, but they weren't tears of pain, they weren't tears of sadness, they were just tears of joy and happiness and gratitude. And for weeks and weeks after that experience, I just fell into what I refer to as my Dr. Joe Dispenza bubble. It was like nothing was going to penetrate my bubble. I just felt so happy and joyful and connected. And that is consciousness. My levels of consciousness expanded to this whole new level where I just felt that connection to all that is. And that's what Sadhguru is referring to. It's experiencing everything as a part of you, that there's no separation. And I think consciousness is something that we evolve with. It's an expansion of your existence that really just doesn't know any limits. And that consciousness, just as I experienced with Dr. Joe Dispenza, it just soars above the jagged rocks of reason. It soars above the limitations of the personal mind, the little mind. It allows us to step into that infinite intelligence, that universal mind. Now, while self awareness absolutely helps us to understand ourselves more deeply, consciousness expands our awareness beyond our identity. And so many of the people that I work with, myself included, have identities. And identity is who basically it is that we think we are. It's a story that we've told ourselves time and time again that has innocently gone on to create an identity, but more often than not, an identity that doesn't serve us. So, where I see this is particularly where people have got ingrained beliefs about themselves. So, the belief that I'm not enough, that's an identity. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Something that I hear more and more often is this term of imposter syndrome. Well, imposter syndrome is just a thought that you have about yourself. But again, anything that we place our focus of attention on, any of the thoughts that we continue to nurture about ourselves, that's going to create an identity about who it is that you think you are. And one of the areas that I work a lot with is anxiety. And I hear so many of my clients, when I first start working with them, talk about my anxiety. My anxiety. Well, that lets me know straight away that they've got an identity, that the anxiety has become part of who it is that they think they are, that they think they're an anxious person, they think that they're just a natural born worrier, or that they've just been experiencing living in this anxious state for so long that it's become part of this very unwanted, but it has become part of their identity. So self-awareness helps us to see where it is that we are limiting ourselves. Self-awareness, it invites you to dive into the depths of your being. But consciousness lifts you up. It allows you to soar above those limitations of the personal mind. And it's a little bit like just this beautiful dance between the inward gaze and the outward embrace. And each of them are always enriching and informing each other. And so the more that you can nurture your self-awareness, that you gain access to higher and higher states of consciousness. And the more that you're able to tap into that innate wisdom, you're able to tap into the universal truths that surround you. And equally, by expanding your consciousness, you also enhance your self-awareness. So they feed into each other. It's like a transformative dance of self-discovery and interconnectedness that when we embrace it, open the doors to just such profound transformation. So, when it comes to nurturing self awareness and consciousness, then you might be wondering, well, what can I do, Sarah? What can I do to experience everything that it is that you're talking about? So, here are some of my ideas for practical steps that you can take to nurture that self awareness and consciousness within you. And what I would say is that for me, it's about just finding what works for you. There is no set prescription. But one of the things that I find incredibly helpful is daily breath work. And there's lots of different types of breath work that we can do. But when we're caught in a thought storm, then clarity, it often seems very, very elusive. And one thing I absolutely know to be true is that you can't think your way out of overthinking. But thinking, it feels so seductive. It feels like if we're thinking about something, we're doing something about it. But when you find yourself basically hopping from one train of thought to another, you just find yourself on that merry-go-round. You find yourself getting more and more tangled. Where we need a solution, where we need an answer to something, it doesn't lie in our thinkings. It's just that we've fallen into this illusion that we need to think about our problems in order to find a solution. And as Eckhart Tolle highlights in his book, The Power of Now, your true power lies in the present moment. So it's possibly something that you want to consider doing at the beginning of the day to start with something like breath work. And there are plenty of different YouTube videos out there that can teach you different breathing techniques. Now, something which I'm trained in is called quantum flow. And quantum flow for me is an incredible technique, an incredible modality that really opens up my heart. It really allows me to experience that connection that I spoke to, the connection to all that is. And through quantum flow, I'm able to tune into the present moment. I'm able to observe how I'm feeling. And it's a practice that involves the series of somatic body movements. And through those somatic body movements, I'm able to transform and alchemize emotions that are creating contraction within my body. So, whether that's frustration or worry or impatience or whatever. But it really helps me to connect with those deeper levels of consciousness. And I've tried lots and lots of different practices, but I would say, in terms of raising my levels of consciousness, that for me, quantum flow is absolutely where it's at. Now, one of the things that we are going to start doing is running weekly quantum flow practice sessions. And these will be early sessions for people that are interested in raising their levels of consciousness and self-awareness. So if that's something that you're interested in finding out more about, then do drop an email to info@themindsolution.com. Now, the other thing, which it might not surprise you to hear this, is meditation. Now, over the years, I've had a very mixed relationship with meditation. I really wanted to be more consistent. And after my Dr. Joe Dispenza experience, I was actually really good at being more consistent with my meditation and getting up at sort of 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to meditate, but couldn't seem to stick to it. And my breakthrough came when I just took the pressure off. And instead of trying to meditate for half an hour, 45 minutes, I decided, you know what, let's just meditate for 10 minutes a day. And being a very practical person, I like to meditate on a specific question. So for me, what I do is I just make myself comfortable. I usually do a little bit of breath work, and that's something as simple as just focusing on my breath. I tend to meditate first thing on a morning because I know that if I try to do it later in the day or before bed, I just fall asleep. So I will make a point of getting up a bit earlier, making myself comfortable, and just thinking about actually what it is that I want to access. What is it if I have a specific question about my life, about my business? And I just ask my higher mind to show me what's needed, what it is that I need to know, what it is that I need to see about something. And then I drop into my heart. And I'm not trying to make anything happen. I'm not trying to slow down my thinking. I think if I meditate on a morning, my mind is far, far quieter, which I think you will find the same with. But all I'm doing is I'm just sitting in the energy of my heart and I'm just focusing on my breathing. And sometimes that innate wisdom, it comes through very quickly. Sometimes I don't see what it is that I need to know, but I don't get myself into a stew about that. But what I found is that for me, that approach to meditation gave my meditation practice a more clear purpose. Now, I don't meditate every single day. I often combine my morning routine with journaling, which is something I do every day. I do classes, different workout classes. You'll find me usually at Body Combat at 6:45 in the morning. And sometimes I'll just skip meditation. And again, I think this is about finding what works for you, because when we try to create routines that we're putting pressure on ourselves to achieve, then they're more likely to fall down. So just doing what works for you, but having something in the form of a morning routine, I would highly, highly recommend. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, journaling. Journaling for me is, it's considered a high performance habit, but I think it's such a powerful tool for self-awareness because it really helps to recognize the patterns and the triggers. Now, one of the questions that I'm often asked about when it comes to journaling is, what do I write? And you can use journaling prompts to help you get started if you're brand new to journaling. You know, something that I really recommend is using a good old-fashioned pen and paper rather than using technology. Because when we're journaling with a pen and paper, it actually slows down our brain waves. And that's what we need for greater levels of self-awareness. Because trust me, if you're thinking at 100 miles an hour, you're not going to be very aware. Your thoughts are going to be chaotic. So a really simple journaling prompt to get you started is to just think or consider a recent emotional experience and just write about it in your journal. Now, what are the emotions that you felt? What triggered them? Perhaps what does this emotional experience remind you of? Where was your focus of attention before this experience? And what does this experience have to teach you about yourself? You know, every experience that we have brings with it, if we're prepared to dig deep, it brings with it the opportunity to grow, to learn. There's always a lesson in something. So just reflecting on an experience, even if it was a painful or uncomfortable experience, what does this teach you? Even if you were to just give it your best guess. And also reflect on, what are you making this situation mean about yourself? Maybe there was something that happened at work that you're making it mean something about yourself that it doesn't have to. And I see this so much with people that they take things incredibly personally. And that again is our inner reality that's based on those perceptual thoughts, that's making something mean something it really doesn't? And what are the thoughts that you keep thinking that keep reactivating this feeling? And just jotting those down, being aware of these thoughts. And maybe you can even recognize them as habitual thoughts, because about 90% of the thoughts that we think are habitual. And then, last but not least, I would say that if you are serious about transformation, if you're serious about raising your levels of self-awareness and consciousness, is to engage with a coach or a therapist. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you here. I am not an advocate of counselling or CBT. I have held around about 10,000 one-to-one sessions over the last 12 or 13 years. And so many of my clients have come to me after engaging in counselling and CBT, and it's not made any real difference. It's maybe given them a little bit of insight into certain experiences, but it's not created the level of change and transformation that they desired. But by using my approach, which is a combination of coaching and EFT tapping therapy, different energy healing techniques, the MAP method, and hypnotherapy, we have been able to transform what it is that they needed to experience change in, often in a matter of a handful of sessions. And some of these people had been working with a counsellor for, in some cases, years, and hadn't made the kind of shifts that were needed. So I would invite you to explore different therapies that can work at that deeper level of the unconscious mind. Because remember, as I said, 95% of the time, the unconscious mind is running the show. So it's my belief that if we really want to create change and transformation, that's the level that we need to be working at. So as I bring this podcast to an end, I trust that you can see that when it comes to our growth, when it comes to our evolution, that self-awareness and consciousness are integral aspects of this journey. It's an ever evolving journey. It doesn't have an end point. We don't reach a point where we're like, yay, we're done. But we keep evolving, we keep growing. And the more that we are unlocking these insights, the more that we experience transformation, then the higher and higher our levels of consciousness grow, that allow us to live a life that is just at a whole different level. So if you have any questions or if you're looking for one-to-one support, then do get in touch at info@themindsolution.com. But otherwise, I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments. So do feel free to drop them into the comments box. And for now, have a wonderful day.